been a long journey for me unlearning all that ugliness, but unbelievable how I would act. And so I have an incredible amount of compassion and love for men who act very badly.
That's good.
That's not who they want to be. Fix everything, protect everyone, provide for everyone.
We got the message, be tough, smart, figure it out. Women got a lot of be nice and all that kind of shit.
Having to like be polite and like be quiet. I feel like whenever you do speak up, it's seen as like, oh, like strength and independence. But a lot of times it comes off as, wow, she's just like a total bitch. And same with men. Like, I think when women see men like almost being like too vulnerable, they're kind of like turned off by it too. That's where it comes from, like men not feeling like they have a safe space to have those emotions.
Hey there, and welcome to the recovery crew here at Deep Waters. I'm Dr. Bob Beare, and our guest this week is Dan Griffin. He's an expert on men's work, masculinity, and how it works with addiction. He's run a lot of programs across the country to help men find that place in their hearts that they can be more authentic and vulnerable, which is required if you want to transform. So anyway, Dan's a fun guy with really good recovery. We're glad to have him here. Deep Waters is a variety of workshops and trainings, and we have a certification program for people who want to learn how to facilitate experiential work. We're glad you're here. Please be part of this. You can find us on our website, deepwatersrecovery.com. All right, enjoy the show. You're in the deep waters now. Okay. Hey there. Welcome to the recovery crew, folks. On the screen in front of me, or if you're not looking at a screen, the voices that you will hear in a moment are Dan Griffin and Camille Reid. We're going to have a ball today together talking about a variety of things, but Dan Griffin is really considered one of the experts on men's work. I'll say much more about that in a little bit. Camille has one of the healthiest feminine and masculine energies in the same body that I've ever known. So I get to learn a lot today. And let's just get started here with Camille. Would you say Camille is also, she's the co-host, but she's also our programs coordinator for Deep Waters Recovery, and she knows all the stuff that we're up to, and she's going to do let folks know about that. Will you do that first?
Yes, a little bit about Deep Waters Recovery. We're an advanced recovery and healing experience for men and women. We've got the Deep Waters Intensive, which will be happening in September later this year in Austin, Texas. We also have our next Experiential Facilitators training, which is going to be June 4th and 5th. Also in Austin, this is a workshop, an opportunity for anyone who works with others to do their own inner work and learn action tools that they can use in groups. Spaces are filling up quick for that, so if you missed June, you can join us August 20th and 21st. We also have a certification track that you can complete 4 of the modules to become a certified experiential facilitator. Deep Waters also has our outpatient program where you can work with Dr. Beare and his colleagues in groups, individuals, couples, and family sessions. And then if you guys can follow us on all of our social media channels, like, share, subscribe, or email us at admin@deepwatersrecovery.com. And you can also follow Dr. Bob on TikTok as the recovery and trauma guy.
Camille's been saying that for the last few podcasts, and I watched the guests smile. Really? This old guy is on TikTok? Is that look, Dan? Is that what you were?
That is the look is, I gotta see this. That's what the look is.
Yeah.
It's pretty irreverent. Now, you would never be that irreverent. Maybe you would. I don't know.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
Yeah.
Wise ass therapy solutions.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look it up. What is it under for TikTok?
I think it's Dr. Bob Beare.
Recovery and trauma guy.
Yeah, the recovery and trauma guy.
Recovery and trauma guy, TikTok. All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so here we are. We're going to have a lively discussion today about, I don't know if anybody noticed, but half of the population or somewhere in that range are men. And Men have been told a lot of things about themselves over the years, and then we've created a bunch of destruction over the last several thousand years with this little thing called patriarchy. And then a men's movement thing happened a few decades ago that many of us slammed into a wall and had to wake up. There was no choice. And some of us are mildly awake right now. We have like 1 ounce of consciousness. And I think Dan Griffin is one of those guys that's choosing to be awake and to help other men. I could almost cry about that because that's actually part of my mission too, to stay awake, become more awake, and help men love themselves so that they're not splattering their lack of self-love on everyone else. And there's 1,000 ways to say it. I think Dan will probably find some good, articulate, and honest ways to share that with folks today. So Dan Griffin is a master's level dude with internationally recognized author, thought leader, and expert on men's relationship masculinity, author of several books. A couple of them are A Man's Way Through Relationships. The other is A Man's Way Through the 12 Steps. And he's also served as a senior fellow at the Meadows Treatment Center. Anybody who's been paying attention to the Recovery Crew podcast, we referred to the Meadows a lot. Really, some of the very best healing work that's happening on the planet was birthed there and is still alive. And the folks that have worked there, like Dan, are bringing an advanced form of recovery in combination with the very best of the clinical interventions for trauma. So Dan Griffin and I have almost met many times along the way of bringing men into their own hearts. And today we finally showed up in the same place, apparently, Dan, with the help of Zoom. And I'd like to introduce our listeners to Dan Griffin. And Dan, if you just want to check in, tell your story, and just let folks know what's lighting you up these days, and maybe we'll have a little dialogue along the way. So glad you're here.
Oh man, thank you so much. It's great to be with you both, and great to be here. And yeah, I'm somebody who's written some books, and I've done some work, and I do some work with men and with professionals. But there are incredible people doing work with men, and like yourself. And I'm just, we need to be a collective force because, as you mentioned, I love how you said it, men splattering their lack of self-love all over the place, because, that's really what it comes down to. We've been hypnotized into thinking we're not lovable, and we've been hypnotized into thinking we can take that lack of self-love and take it out on other people, and that we have that right. And man, that's been a long journey for me. It's been a long journey for me, unlearning all that ugliness. And one of the things that I've found is that ugliness really permeates my being when I'm stressed. When I get stressed and I have a trauma response, and I can see things, I can have things come out of my mouth, I can have behaviors. I certainly could. I'd like to think I've gotten a lot better, but still very human about it all. But unbelievable what would happen to me and how I would act. And so I have an incredible amount of compassion and love for men who act very badly, because I believe for the most of them, that's not who they want to be.
Yeah, it's not
who they want to be.
I'm sorry to interrupt you early, but I can already tell you're going to say things. It's just I have to say things in response to. So
yeah.
Here's the catch-22, isn't it, Dan? So we act out the worst when we're under stress, right? And what causes stress any more than the 3 things we were told to be? Tough, figure shit out, and fix shit. So we're constantly fixing. We got to be strong, right? And we got to figure this shit out. I'm stressed just talking about it. Yeah. And we wonder why.
That's right. And I I call it, just for simplicity's sake, I call it the man rules. But I use that very intentionally, that language very intentionally. And I also talk about what you mentioned. I talk about conscious masculinity, that's really what we're reaching for, is this idea of a conscious masculinity that's guided by enlightened choice, enlightened choice of behavior, enlightened choice of thought, enlightened choice of being. And that conscious masculinity, when we can get there, that's we're actively choosing the man that we want to be. I'm actively choosing who I want to be. And, those man rules, we learn those so early. I mean, we're learning them in the hospital. We have that play out with us because we know that baby boys are still today held less, caressed less, talked to in a different tone, allowed to be by themselves longer. And if you know anything about attachment, which, I think is profound, one of the things that we hear about attachment is how important it is for connection and how important it is for us to have that connection. Well, that connection is disrupted from the moment we're born, and it just gets worse. And those man rules play out. And like you said, don't cry, don't feel, and don't ask for help. Don't be vulnerable. Use sex as a weapon. Use sex as the only form of connection.
Yeah.
Fix everything, protect everyone, provide for everyone.
That was my life. Do you read my history before recovery?
Right.
So I slammed into a wall when I had a child that died. I don't know that that's necessarily a unless it's karma or something, a direct response to my unconsciousness. But then I lost a marriage, and I thought it was the end of my life. In fact, I wanted to kill myself, and I came crawling into the program, 12-step recovery and deep healing men's work. It took that for me. It was like truly life or death. And so you look at Dan here, Camille, good looking guy. He's so cool. He can have his hair messed up on purpose. You see, I want to get that cool. I'm trying to get mine like right in place. But my guess is, Dan, that you must have slammed into a couple of walls too in order to be as awake as you are. Maybe you could just share with our listeners a little bit.
If my wife were on here, I don't know how much she would say I'm awake, but I'd like to think that she thinks I'm more awake than I was 18 years ago when we got married. Or my daughter, and being awake for my daughter, who's going to be 12 soon. I mean, like, that's huge for me. And I hit the wall. I hit the wall early. I was blessed. I was absolutely blessed to hit the wall when I was 21. But, that wall was really powerful. And I walked into the 12-step rooms, and it was really this idea of like, I remember when a man tried to hug me, and my first thought was like, this is 26 years ago. So, I was like, I didn't know. I always say, I don't know whether I wanted to punch him or just collapse in his arms.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like the dichotomy of my life, was this push and pull that I had with people. And I walk into that room, and it's like, you're welcome here. And I remember this other guy, Bud. I was in Southern Virginia. I'm from the East Coast originally. And I walk into this, small Southern Virginia room, and this guy Bud is there, and I immediately am judging him. He's got a greasy white tank top. I mean, you can imagine Bud. You can see him in your eyes, and I'm judging him, and I'm like this spoiled, kid from upper middle class Maryland, and I'm just got these ideas. And then Bud starts talking. He starts sharing in the meeting, and he starts getting so real, and he starts talking about what's happening in his family, and he's talking about what's happening in his marriage, and he starts to cry. And I'm like blown away. I'm like, how are men acting like this? How are men behaving like this? And it's interesting, right? It's when I saw what I call the water. It's so funny that you're called Deep Waters Recovery, because I talk about this concept of the water, and the water is this idea. It goes from this guy, David Foster Wallace, was an author, an amazing author, and he gave a commencement speech at Kenyon College. And the little story that he told was of two fish at the bottom of the ocean. Another fish swims up and looks at them and says, "Hey guys, how's the water?" and swims off. And the two fish look at each other and they say, "What the hell is water?"
Yeah.
Right? And that's us.
Yeah.
That's us as human beings. We are in the water, but we don't have consciousness of it. We don't have, it's the reality that we are embedded in, immersed in on a daily basis, but don't necessarily have that awareness of.
Yep.
And so the water, a huge part of the water I've discovered is gender. So much so that when a woman's having a baby, before the baby's even born, there's a narrative that's being written about the baby, and that there are certain things that are supposed to happen with that baby. If it's a boy, if it's a girl, you have these gender reveal parties now where, it's like so important to know, is it a boy or a girl? And if it's a boy, that narrative begins. And what I've found is that narrative follows us.
Yeah,
it follows us into our lives.
One of our guests on the podcast was he was doing a live Facebook feed of a gender reveal party this weekend, and he's like one of the master wise asses of the planet. And everybody was like, "It's a girl, it's a boy." He said, "Why don't you let the kid decide? Why are we doing this? Why don't you let the kid decide?" And everybody's getting pissed at him because they had an idea of what they're. It was really funny to watch.
Yeah,
that's right. We get launched on this onto this ocean that's already prepared. Even though we come into the world pretty clean and clear and without a whole lot of wounds yet, but there's already some plan for us, right?
Plan, right? Absolutely, right. We're gonna. It's a box that we get put into. And these man rules that we begin to follow. I mean, I was following those rules, and I learned those rules not in safety. I mean, that is really something that I try to bring home all the time. I did not learn those rules in a safe environment. I did not learn them under safe circumstances. Whether you come from a good home or not, the schoolyard is brutal. Yeah. The schoolyard is brutal about boys being boys and girls reinforcing it. Girls being girls and boys being boys, and we reinforce it with each other, and we're all in the water together.
Yep.
We're all swimming in this water together, and it's like, how do we navigate that if we can't see it? And so we begin to see it. And so what I say is, that night that man tried to hug me, and that night that man Bud spoke and shared and just destroyed my preconceived idea of who he was, that I saw the water.
Yeah. That
I saw the water of 12-step recovery. And I was like, it's so interesting, because what men, I mean, I don't know if how much you've thought about this, Bob, but this idea that as men, what we have been trained to do is essentially contradictory to being in recovery. We have this experience where we tell men to not be weak, and then we put them in an environment where we say, embrace weakness. Yeah. Don't cry. Don't ask for help. Ask for help. Don't have your feelings. Have your feelings. Don't, use sex as the only form of connection. Find connection in all of its different forms. We have this massive dichotomy.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why men struggle to be in recovery, when it's like we've been living by these rules and trying to find our way navigating these rules, and then people are telling us, but no, do this. And we do it to save our lives, but not necessarily consciously.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm really trying to bring home, is this opportunity for consciousness, where men can be more and more conscious of the scripts they follow, And if they can be, then there's choice that's available. Until you really see those scripts, there's not a lot of choice available. And
Yep.
until you see the water, you're wondering, you're not even sure what is going on.
That's one of the things right there that you and I are both on. We're pointing directly at it from slightly different angles, but we're pointing at exactly the same thing, because there's at Deep Waters, we chant this. So first, recover. In other words, stop putting the shit in your body, stop adjusting your chemistry, right? And then the second piece, which doesn't really exist in the rooms, right? Unless you do a particular kind of fifth step with a particular kind of sponsor, we are not going to heal the trauma. And that's what you're pointing at. We've got to heal the wounds and the shame and the messages that we carry about being vulnerable and open and authentic human beings. And then the third piece is to find something juicy in your life that you love to do, right? But I'm telling you, you're not even going to get to that if you can't I consider trauma resolution work to be relapse prevention, advanced relapse, and necessary relapse prevention.
Absolutely. It's recovery maintenance at its best. And, from the perspective of gender, trauma, the literal definition of trauma is wound, as you know, but the literal definition of trauma is wound. But in the language of men, trauma equals weak, and weak in a deep, deep way. And
Yep.
So it's how do we help men navigate that message that we turn on ourselves and that we make about weakness, that we make about being weak, looking weak, about feeling weak. And how do we begin to let that go and embrace it? Embrace let go of the judgment around it and embrace this powerful experience that I'm sure is part of Deep Waters recovery, is cracking open. And cracking open, you can't crack open without weakness.
Well, there's
your weakness.
There's an overlapping wound here that I want to hear from Camille, if you have thoughts on this. So yes, there's a men's movement, and we've learned how to be a little bit vulnerable. It's in the waters now, whether ever all of us are doing it or not, right?
That's right.
But at the same time, women have been encouraged to stand up and be strong and take charge. And actually, there's a little bit of role flipping that's happened because, women, we got the message: be tough, smart, figure it out, fix it, right? Women got a lot of be nice and all that kind of shit. And so we don't get to be ourselves, right. So it's really about healing our feminine and our masculine, no matter what gender we are. I know it gets a little complicated. You have any thoughts on that, Camille?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that. I mean, I know I love the men's work side of things. I think it's really, really important. And I know just for me, especially growing up, is that I was more of a tomboy, and I feel like there was so much bullying that happened because I wanted to do all the boy stuff and really did not as girls were becoming more feminine, I was I don't want any part of this. What is going on? I don't want this. Why are we doing that? And even now I feel Bob, you said, just having to be polite and be quiet or not speak up. And I feel whenever you do speak up, yes, it's seen as strength and independence, but a lot of times it comes off as oh wow, she's just being a bitch, and it's no, that's not what this is. And I'm also in a program of codependency, and so those setting of boundaries, when you set a firm boundary, somebody hears it as wow, she's just a total bitch, and it's not true. It's this is what I have to do for myself and for my recovery, and just the objectifying that goes along with it. It's okay, I can objectify you until you start to speak, and then I'm scared of you because you're too honest or too blunt, and that's not the side of a female that I want to see. And same with men. I think when women see men almost being too vulnerable or too emotional, they're kind of turned off by it too. Not all women, this is very broad generalizations, but that's where it comes from, men not feeling they have a safe space to have those emotions.
I think that's right on. I mean, I talk about the man rules and I talk about the woman rules. And the reason why I talk about the woman rules is because women challenged me to talk about women. I was focused on men, and they're like, you can't exclude the experience of women if you're going to have an honest conversation. And it was mostly women that were in my audiences anyways. And so I had this profound experience of women teaching me the woman rules and teaching me what that looked like, and being in a relationship with a woman as well and watching that. And so, it's like, that's the water. We each have our own experience with the rules. And then how do we navigate beyond the rules to where we can really choose who we want to be? And that's the beauty of recovery. Recovery creates that whole human being. Recovery, I mean, it can create a whole human being if we can see how, what you were saying, Bob, it's like we're raised to be half human beings. The way that the dichotomy works of the man rules and the woman rules, we're raised to be these half human beings. And for me, it's like embracing something that transcends or goes beyond, just what a man is and what a man's supposed to be. And instead, this conscious masculinity is like, who am I? What's authentic for me? I've always been a sensitive guy. I've always been a really emotional guy. And it's like, I hated that about me because it got me made fun of, it got me beat up, it got me bullied at home and otherwise. And to come to embrace that as a big, huge part of who I am and one of my strengths has been an important part of my recovery. Now, for other men, it's a different path, but it's like, who's my authentic self? And the trauma that suppresses that authenticity is so powerful. So, I mean, it's so wonderful, the work that you all are doing.
And it gets pushed into the shadow. I'm going to make a little reference to Jung here. I might be careful when you say Jung to anybody that's in men's work, because he was pointing directly at the work. All that stuff that we were told about ourselves, right? Don't be. So what happens to that vulnerable part of me? It gets pressed down, right? What happens to that sensitive, creative, artistic, flowing part? It gets, and do you think it has energy in it? Or is it just benign vibrations? No, it's got giant volcanic energy. And when you start pushing that stuff down, I don't know if anybody's ever studied hydraulics or pneumatics, but it's just natural. There's going to be some explosions, right? So, what are some of the ways, Dan, we have the Braveheart experience. I really don't know all of the stuff that you're up to, but, I was involved with the Mankind Project for quite a while, which grew out of the men's movement. Done a lot of work with Robert Bly in the early days where we could get poetry rolling, the mythopoetic stuff. And these days, pretty much I'm creating spaces where men can do psychodrama and bioenergetics to really get down in the body and cough up those hairballs and really get a taste of themselves, right? And usually they find their way to the river. I call it the river of grief, right? Which is, there's a secret piece of gold in there, and that is the happiness that we were trying to reach for cars and women and the right job and all this stuff out here to get happy. But what we were really looking for was the joy that comes on the same river as grief, which I avoided. I avoided that one the most. So what are your dances that you do with men to invite them into that deeper place?
Yeah, it's so interesting that you mentioned River of Grief. In A Man's Way Through the 12 Steps, I have a specific chapter on grief, because grief, I think, is the portal for men's authenticity and men's recovery, just as anger is the portal for women's recovery and women's authenticity, because it's the two biggest things that we haven't been allowed. Women are not allowed to be angry, and if you are angry, you're a bitch. And it's that kind of really how that gets suppressed and laid down, and watching my wife kind of recover and move into her own anger has been, especially being from Minnesota. So I grew up on the East Coast, but I ended up in Minnesota, and, watching her step into her anger in a really powerful way has enabled her to have a voice in a way, it was messy at times because it's like this new thing that you're playing with. And it's just like with grief. I mean, for me, grief shows up in lots of different ways now. I cry at American Idol. I cry at, things that I wouldn't necessarily be thinking.
I think I beat you. I think I've got you beat because I cry at Project Runway.
Yeah, see, there you go. Right?
That's it. That's even another level of vulnerability.
And there's actually research. There's some research that actually shows baby boys are more emotional than baby girls. There's been some recent research that has shown that. And so what's interesting about that is it's kind of like, wow. So we take like this experience, this amazing experience away from boys because we say they're not supposed to be emotional.
Yeah.
And then we're trying to get that back. And then, when we're getting that back, I mean, my daughter laughs at me because of how much I cry at The Voice and American Idol and all of that stuff. She's like, "Oh, are you crying? Oh, are you crying?" And and part of that is because, she doesn't see that.
That's right.
She doesn't see that with men.
Man,
it's still not in the zeitgeist that men are fully emotional and allowing ourselves to be that way. And I'm trying to model it at home as best I can.
And what kind of, so it's like it's the ripple effect, Dan. Maybe, you're doing a lot of great work. You and I are doing a lot of great work with a lot of people. And maybe it's having some effect. But I know one thing, my daughter grew up, and I could cry. I am crying about this. She grew up seeing this. So she doesn't have to have that expectation and that resistance, and it's not a surprise to her to choose a man who's open or to be able to be even empower and to be that. She's got a tough masculine part of herself that's like loosened up a little bit, I think, over because she's been through quite a bit. Anyway, I think I'm blessing a younger man, which is you, for being that kind of a dad. It's beautiful.
Thank you. And I send the blessing right back because I've stood on the shoulders of men like you who've come before me, who've told me, you can do this, you need to do this, and you're raising a little girl. Even more importantly, she needs to know not just how you treat girls, but to watch how a woman is treated, how a woman is respected, to watch how I interact with her mom, to watch how her mom interacts with me, to see that. I mean, I love MKP for what it did for me personally, but sometimes what seemed missing was the conversation around the impact of patriarchy and that patriarchy had on our lives as men and our lives as men and our relationships with women. That social political aspect was missing from that. And that can't be avoided. I mean, like, that's very real. And what's happening with women is they're being encouraged to stand up. Men are being encouraged to stand down. And so many men take that as an affront. Yeah. So many men, it's not like, how can I be of service to women? It's how you're shutting me down. You're shutting my voice off. Instead of saying, no, but this is an opportunity to be of service in a way that enables us to support and love. And, it's really interesting navigating it in today's society because it's falling apart in a beautiful way, but it's going to cause a lot of pain before we see the gold that you're talking about. It's like we as a society are falling apart the way we watch individuals fall apart. And that falling apart, that shadow is becoming more and more present in our society. And the pain that's happening as a result of that is immense and amazing. And I guess I'm an inveterate optimist in the sense that I see this as a positive when I can step back and see the forest through the trees. Yeah. I really see us moving towards something beautiful, but it's messy, and just like my own individual recovery has been messy, And, you don't begin to really embrace who you are without it being messy, because so much of that had been rejected, and so much of that had been, I was told that it was wrong and it was not okay, that there was something wrong with me. And I heard that from my dad, who heard that from his dad, who heard that from his dad. But, it's about breaking cycles.
Yeah.
And having this opportunity to have a voice and have men and women teach me how to have a voice in recovery, honest voice, and doing the deeper work. It's interesting navigating that in 12-step meetings, because some meetings can handle it and some meetings can't. But I'm hearing more and more people talk about trauma in the 12-step world.
And here's the problem. And I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but here's the dilemma or the paradox or whatever the hell it is. It's okay. So in recovery, we have to not blame our addiction on our past. Yes. We cannot blame our addiction on our parents, the school, the bullies, because once we start blaming, our recovery stops, right? So anybody that's 12-step recovery, just absolute, that's all they've done. Anybody that comes in and says, yeah, my dad, shamed me over and over and over, and talks about that, and immediately I'm going to think, oh, so you're blaming your addiction on your past. So there's these two schools, right? And it's been quite a process for me over the past 10 years to sort of bring these two worlds together. Can we talk about and heal our trauma without blaming anybody? Yeah. I'm not blaming my dad for being an old tough guy. Are you kidding? I'm not blaming my mom for being smothering. Right. Actually, that was her wound. She just never got a chance to work on it. But here's the deal, Dan, as you know, I've got to work on that stuff, but I've got to be careful not to be blaming my addiction and not to own my own. I have to have some accountability, right? So this is the dilemma.
The wounds that we begin to look at in a matter-of-fact way, kind of like with the 4-step, a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. Well, that's what the wounds can be, is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. We can navigate trauma in a way that frees us without it having, honestly, the people who are stuck in being victims are never going to be able to truly work through their trauma and free themselves from it. It's when you move from being a victim to a survivor. It's when you move from blame to forgiveness that the freedom and the healing happens. And I never thought I'd be able to forgive my father for how he treated me and for how he raised me. But I've been overwhelmed with compassion and empathy. I've seen my father in me. I've seen the worst of him in me in sobriety.
I hate it when that happens.
In sobriety, I've seen that. And so I can have compassion for the man who never got the sobriety. He drank himself to death at the age of 54. I'm 48 now. He was a young man, and I didn't realize that at the time. And, it's one of those things where it's like letting go of the blame of my father, blaming my father for anything about my life has been one of the most freeing things for me. And it's given me an opportunity to have a true relationship with my wife and with my daughter. Those are intricately connected, and so powerful. And I'm, so grateful for the men and women who taught me that and have given me that work, given me that opportunity to do that work. And sometimes it's through the 12-step lens, and sometimes it's through a different lens. Sometimes it's through a combined.
Yeah. I'd like to I got a little vision of having maybe the trauma folks, which is me and you, and the recovery people, which is me and you. Do we have to be in different camps? And I think that's part of our work that you and I are up to in the world. And Camille's a young superstar. I'm telling you, you're going to, that's for another podcast, but just one of these natural facilitator healer people.
Awesome.
I don't know where they come from. It's like what planet?
From the pain.
From the pain.
And from doing the work. You've done the work.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You're doing the work, and you've done, I mean, the work always continues. The work is always there for me. I mean, God help me the day that I think I've arrived or that I've done the work, because that's when the shadow loves to come out and play.
Yeah. So
kick your ass.
I wanted to point at one thing as we sort of transition here, Dan, and that I've had my own challenges with the MKP folks, the New Warrior Training Adventure, but the guy that started that, Ron Herring, and a couple other guys had a vision that men would have a safe place to do their work. And they created that, and we've needed that, and we're brand new at this shit, Dan. It's like we're like almost like a somebody who's been abused. You can't expect them to have all of the components together within the first 30 years of doing work after several thousand years of being rotten pricks. Did I say that out loud? A couple thousand years of being completely unconscious. We're not going to get this thing right for a while. We're not going to bring this into society. I think we still need a long period of time where we have safe places to just do our work, heal ourselves. And then, but guys like you, I have respect for, because I know that you're really pushing to bring this into the consciousness of even more politically and into the world of dialogue around gender disparities, and we have to be able to have these messy conversations. I don't get into that too much. I'm really going out in the woods and helping men heal from their trauma. And Deep Waters is bringing men and women together to do that work together. So I think we're both. We have a similar vision, but I really respect you bringing it in. It's really hard to do it if you don't have a strong container. And I think you're doing a lot of the work out there where you have to have these difficult conversations where there isn't necessarily a container. Do you know what I'm pointing at?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the messiness, right? I mean, when you have the messiness within a solid, healthy, safe container, it's beautiful. When you have the messiness just kind of out there in the zeitgeist and just kind of, which is where we're at. We're in a messy space right now. Yeah. But I still think it's beautiful, man. I still think that there's some opportunities for dialogue and conversation, and there's opportunities for work and healing if we take the blaming away. I mean, some of the stuff that's happened, some of the things I've heard about men and some of the conversations that I've heard, really, assailed toward men and women's anger has been counterproductive. And we have to be able to have that conversation as well, where it's like, you can't discount men, but we have to be accountable. And we have to be accountable. And I think the thing is that men have been so unaccountable for how we have treated women, how we have treated each other, how we have ruled over, the society at large, and the power that we have had, that we take responsibility for that. And when women can hear us taking responsibility for it, it helps that anger to shift. And, but, our society getting in touch with its anger, I think, is part of the healing. Yeah. It's just a matter of how it's done and how we move through it. And honestly, I learned a powerful lesson when I learned to withstand my wife's anger and to be there and not let my own shame and my own fear and my insecurity and my past wounds dictate how I was going to respond to her anger when she was just experiencing her own process.
And the only chance we have around that is to do our own work so that our unresolved trauma does not get re-stimulated.
Absolutely.
And because right now, as you talk about women being really mad at me, I can feel it in my I've got some work to do, Dan. Will you help me, please? It's an ongoing process. I'm not going to heal this. I'm not going to heal this meat suit or all of the stuff that's been passed to me by several generations of Celtic tough guys who used to throw rocks, I think, for sports, large boulders. I don't know. But I think we're all doing the best we can, and inviting people into circles where the healing can happen. And,
Yes.
just on that topic, men only knew how to do rage. Women only knew how to do nice. Now we're learning how to do healthy anger too, right? Can I do?
Right.
I work with a lot of men that avoid the work because they're afraid they're going to hurt somebody and actually, if we can give them a strong enough container to let that stuff out and let the volcanic energy off the top, then they can hit the grief. A lot of times my grief is just beneath that crust of anger, right?
Absolutely. And you see some amazing work when men can touch that. And, for some men, it's getting in touch with the anger. For some men, it's not. For some men, it's, it's navigating it in different ways. I don't have any answers other than just trying to, trust my own intuition around where somebody's got to go, or listening to them as they share their story and what's going on with them. But, I hope it's clear. I have great respect for MKP and the work that MKP has done. And I started this men's work, deeper men's work, through MKP. So the Mankind Project was huge for me. But there was a point where I was kind of like, how trauma informed are we being? There was a point where it was like, and I think it's like that evolution of MKP continues, and that evolution of the conversation that MKP gets to lead. And
I love
part of, that continues. And I think that's the component, is that we keep talking, we keep communicating, we keep having a dialogue, men and women. And then, we can't ignore what's happening in this gender evolution where people don't identify as men or women, trans men, trans women, non-binary, non-gender, agender. There's all these terms. And what it comes down to is people just really trying to find their most authentic self outside of the confines of gender.
Yeah.
And I think that's profound. And it can be scary for a lot of people. It can be very emotional. It can touch their own shame. Brene Brown has said the deepest wounds that we carry lie within the way we've been raised in our gender. And you can't divorce that experience of gender from our deepest wounds. And that's part of, the work that I do, is trying to incorporate that and bring that awareness of the water, to people, so that they begin to see and they can move toward conscious femininity, conscious masculinity, or just conscious gender, just consciousness. In many ways is a way.
And anybody that's like listening and saying, I don't want to feel that stuff, which is me most of the time. And what do you mean the wound? Why would I go into my wound? I'm trying to get away from all that shit.
I'm trying to keep it in the basement, man.
Yeah. Well, here's one reason. And I've been doing this a long time. I can just guarantee you, and you can skip over some research if you want. The gold that you're looking for is in that wound. The wounds that I have from my childhood that I've worked on have brought me to this place in my life where I'm doing the kind of work. Camille knows this. I say this every day. I don't do shit that I don't want to do anymore. I'm following my authentic rhythm, and people that love doing some of the shit I don't like to do have come around. Like Camille's one of them. This organization stuff that is not my thing. When we start to live our authentic life that was buried underneath all of this, all of the chatter of the trauma, once we start living a deeper, more authentic life, the right stuff starts to appear. Jung said anything that is unresolved within us will appear outside of us and we'll call it fate. It's just happening to me. I don't have anything to do with it. Yeah, right. I am creating everything in my life with all of this shame and chatter that I don't even know I have, until I run into some guy, like some sensei like Dan Griffin, who says, wait, stop. Where is that in your body? Feel that. This is a safe place. I don't know if you say that shit or not. I do. But hey, let's, this is such a, man, this is one of these conversations that we could, how many days do we have to do? Only 45 minutes here. So I think we're kind of coming to the closer. Why don't we give Camille a chance to have the last word in this men's conversation?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I really, really appreciate it. And as Bob said, I think this conversation has so many different layers, like between like the dialogue of men and women, and, you know, like as an inner like angry woman who doesn't express it often enough, like it's just an interesting thing to see you and hear you kind of allowing your wife to have that space and like giving her the freedom to do so. I think that's like really important just on both sides, and like her doing the same for you, like just allowing in a partnership to express those emotions and for the other partner not to like be scared of them, you know, or not being like put off by them and kind of having this reaction that like you know, brings up trauma in the other person. So yeah, my final word is just, I think this is an ongoing discussion. I think the gender fluidity conversation is a whole nother thing that's going on. And I think, you know, as we look back at this period that's going on now, we are going to see that a lot of this is, the unresolved gender trauma being expressed in this way. That comes up differently in everybody. So yeah, I appreciate the work that you guys do, and I have a passion for it too with the young women in a different way.
Yeah.
So it's nice. That's
so well said, Camille. So now I've been initiated into the Dan Griffin being more willing to be messy. So I'm going to mess up my hair like his and just see if I. Yeah, it's not working. All right. So it's just, see, for me, it's not therapeutic. It's just messy.
You look like the crazy guy.
Yeah, I just look wacko. Okay. So Dan Griffin, wow. Thank you so much for being here. I consider this an intro. This was intro to Conversations with Dan Griffin. So we'll have you back on here. We're going to do our best to have you come and give your wisdom on step 5, which might be the next podcast after this. We'll see. But anyway, superstar Dan Griffin, healing the planet. And a family, and really cool to hear from you, brother. Would you let the folks listening know how they can reach you, what's happening?
Yeah. Thank you. It's really easy. It's www.dangriffin.com, and that's GRIFFIN.com. And that's the easiest way to learn about my work and see what I'm up to, and to get a hold of me. Dan@dangriffin.com is the email. I'm more than happy to have a conversation or dialogue with anybody, you know, as a result of this podcast. Just mention the podcast in your email if you want to reach out. That would be wonderful. And that's really the central way, is the website.
Yep. And what do you, Dan speaks, you can get him to be a speaker. You work with individuals. What are the different things that you do in the world?
So Dan? I do a lot of public speaking and a lot of training. We do consulting with programs, addiction treatment programs. And I do retreats for men and women. And, you know, that's a big part of it. I, at this time, don't do individual coaching or one-on-one.
But we need you, Dan. We need you. What? Yeah. Actually,
maybe, you know, I should.
I don't know about that. I'm moving toward putting a lot of energy into these healing containers. So we just bring you know, I think we're modeling for folks, do what you do best and what lights you up. I mean, that whatever that is. So
and follow where it leads, man.
Yeah. Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss and doors will open that you didn't even know were there. And that's proven so true. Speaking of what are we up to, Camille? She and I are doing so many different projects. Will you do the short version of what we're up to?
Yes,
please?
The short version. Our next event is the Experiential Facilitators June 4th and 5th. If that one's full at the time that this comes out, you can join us August 20th and 21st. Our website is deepwatersrecovery.com, and then you can email us at admin, ADMIN, at deepwatersrecovery.com. And if you want to get in touch with Dan, reach out to us. We can always connect you guys and be a resource for that as well.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to end with just one quick, fun question apiece. Dan, best TV show of all time for you and why?
Oh man, it's tough. It's gonna be a toss up between Scrubs and Big Bang Theory. And Scrubs, my daughter and I just finished watching that together. Some people might say that was a little irresponsible given her age, but so much of the stuff was over her head. But I'll tell you why. As a sociologist and a trained sociologist, it is one of the most intentional, fascinating explorations of gender and especially masculinity that I've seen. And there are so many poignant moments in Scrubs that are funny, but also serious, that really are about this idea of evolving masculinity and how it shows up.
All right.
So
See, he had to spin it right back to men's work. You can't stop. You can't stop this guy. Thank you. Camille?
Yeah, we watched clips of Scrubs in my communications class 2 years ago and like dissected them like in that way for gender. That's so funny you said that. Well, in the spirit of they just had a new season come out and we're talking about this work, I've been like weirdly obsessed with The Handmaid's Tale, even though it's not funny. It's like very intense and like, women's issues. It's like, I can't stop. Every time I watch it, I'm like, ooh, I need to turn it off after 2 episodes.
Is there, there's a new season just come out?
Yeah.
Oh,
like
wow.
The first 3 episodes. I think the 4th episode comes out today, actually.
Oh, no.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Uh-oh.
I
I'm
can't
bracing
stop.
myself.
It's really intense.
Uh-oh.
So yeah, I'm gonna go with that right now, just because.
Okay.
That's heavy. That's deep.
Well, for me, Handmaid's Tale is a category of its own, so I'm not going to choose that, but oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody hasn't seen it, take a deep breath and get ready to get some support. Okay, so for me, it's Breaking Bad, because I could see that shit happening to me. There's something about it. I put myself, everything that happens there, even though it seems like, no way. I think about it under certain circumstances, that could be me, and it is so well done. The other one is Curb Your Enthusiasm. I think Larry David is a genius, and he's pissed off about exactly the same things I am. Do I have to take my shoes off if I come in your house, Dan? I mean, it's like I'm against this. So just little.
I'll do an honorable mention for The Wire, one of the greatest.
Okay.
One of the
There you go.
One of the greatest shows of all time. And
all right, so we've got that figured out. What the best shows of all time. I don't know if we figured out anything else here, but it's been a blast, and what a good time with you guys. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for everyone listening here to the Recovery Crew. You're in the deep waters now.